DTX equals what thought leaders in digital therapeutics put a stake in the ground about what makes DTX DTX. The Holiday Travel Edition, coming to you from this funky chair in North Carolina. I am your host, Acacia Parks, and with me today is Andy Molnar, CEO of the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. Andy's background's on commercial and market access, hailing formerly from Cognoa and Pear on the DTX side and pharma before that. Thank you for joining us, Andy.
Thank you for having me, Acacia. It's always a pleasure.
So let me pellet you with some questions. First of all, tell us a little bit about you and how you got here. So, what's a formative event in your life or career that influenced your path into DTX?
Yeah. So, as you said, I spent 12 to 13 years in pharma. Um, Pharma does a lot of good things for a lot of people. As an employee, though, it's often hard to understand the difference that you're making in patients' lives. You end up feeling quite separated. And even when you bring in one or two, patients to speak to, 500 people at a time, you don't necessarily feel like you're hands-on and making a difference in their lives. I focused on contracting with insurance companies and GPOs and felt very, very far from the patient. Something I found when I got over to digital therapeutics was, the passion of providers that come over. And I knew almost immediately that I was going to be stuck in this space forever. But really what
Stuck.
brought me, yes, stuck, exactly. In a good way, right? Um, what brought me over was Eric, God, cut that out.
I'm ready for this.
God, what? Okay, we'll start. We'll go over three. What really brought me over to digital therapeutics initially was Everett Crossland. We worked together at Synovian Pharmaceuticals. He was in the BD space and learned about Pear. He went to Pear, and about 4 or 5 months later, had a position open up in market access. And I reached out and asked him if he thought I'd be okay for the role. With that, he said, "Do you have any questions about clinically validated software as a medical device?" And I was like, "No, I don't. This is something I want to be a part of. It seems like the future of medicine." And so I kind of jumped in head first. I remember telling my wife, um, I'd rather be out of a job in 3 months and try this than stay doing the same thing in my career for the rest of my life. And I immediately had a passion for it. But I think the formative event was at Pear Therapeutics. We Everett and I kicked off government affairs work. So up until then, there wasn't really a community of people that were lobbying in Congress for software as a medical device. It was still pretty early on, and we were testing the waters with employer groups and Medicaid programs and things like that. But nobody was focused on CMS from a federal perspective. And so we went down with Kevin Brennan, who is now from at Bluebird Strategies as a lobbyist, and we were working on it was an AdvaMed bill that was focused on breakthrough technologies. And so we went down with the folks from DThera at the time because they had a breakthrough product as well. And so that was Ed Cox and Marty Couliot, names I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with.
Friends.
Yeah, friends. Yeah. And we went around on Capitol Hill, and this was in 2018. And we started talking to people about what a digital therapeutic was in Congress and why they were breakthrough and the impact that they could have on people's lives. And that was the moment that I realized that I cared for the whole industry, and I cared about all the gaps and fixing them so that every product can come to market and we actually have a group of products that can help patients as opposed to just one individual product. And so by the time I got to DTA, I still think back to that day on Capitol Hill, and I have pictures of it that pop up on my Alexa show, every couple months that remind me of where it all began.
You're a digital therapeutics ride or die. One of the
Yeah,
originals.
yeah, that's how cool I am.
No, look, like I think as a nerd who very much feels the same way, like I think there's sort of a common thread that I've heard as I ask people this question, but I think yours most clearly put a point on it, of this idea that, like, if you're going to work in this field, you kind of have to feel like, if I die, I die. Like, this needs to happen. Like, let's just do it. So I don't know. I liked hearing you
You, you,
articulate that. I feel very much the same way.
you don't bring about massive change without a little bit of naivety about how hard it would be, or else nobody would
Yeah,
do it, you know?
fair enough. So, in your mind, let's dig into the meat of the conversation now. DTX for you equals what? And like, I think this is funny because almost everybody, when I ask this question, what's the most defining issue in DTX today? Their first response is reimbursement. But like, they're saying it from the perspective of like whatever else they're doing, like they know reimbursement is super important. But like, you're probably one of the most um, like rich conversationalists on this topic in the world. So I'm just going to guess it's going to have something to do with that, given all the work you're doing. But in your mind, what's the most defining issue in DTX, and what's kind of your unique lens on it?
Yeah, so reimbursement. No, I'm kidding. Obvious,
I mean, yes, yes, you have permission. Like,
obviously, reimbursement is important. Different business models are out there, though, right? Direct to consumer, over the counter, going through your HR benefits, and there's a lot of different digital therapeutics that are successful in a variety of ways. Um, I I really almost want to take a step above reimbursement and say it's the promise of what digital therapeutics can offer. So digital therapeutics should be available to anybody anywhere. Okay, so it shouldn't matter your socioeconomic background, your gender, your race. You should be able to have a digital therapeutic that can help you. And, I actually think insomnia is a great example because cognitive behavioral therapy should be the first line of treatment for insomnia. Most people are getting pills like Ambien or Lunesta, and that's not solving your insomnia problem. Now, cognitive, try and find yourself a sleep doctor that's available and has time to deliver you cognitive behavioral therapy. Um, if you can find one, I'd be happy to know who they are because I would reach out to them immediately and ask them
it's Jared
what they would.
Minkle. There,
There it is.
done.
I'll give them a call
Just,
right
I only
after.
know one. There they are.
Yeah.
Mike Gradisar. Woo, we're done.
Yeah. I had sleep issues. I had to wait 4 to 5 months in Massachusetts, which has a great healthcare system, just to do a sleep test because it's so backed up.
Yep. Our
Right?
insurance won't cover it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I gladly would have paid out of pocket if I knew how to get it earlier. And I'm one of those people that is fortunate enough to be able to do that. Um, so people say, "Oh, is this going to replace a doctor?" No, the doctors aren't even there to replace in many of these
Right.
situations. Doctors are burnt out. They're tired. The government's trying to pay them less money all the time. We're trying to supplement their lives to streamline the things that are repetitive for them so that they can actually focus on being a doctor, so that they can spend more than 3.5 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the new stats are with each patient, so that if somebody is suffering from insomnia, they can say, here's a tool, use this. This is going to help you. And so with that, we have a long way to go. Insomnia is just one example of many where these products, the promises they'll be in the hands of everybody. That's really, really hard. And I'd like to see that happen. The reimbursement piece can figure itself out
Maybe a
along the
part of
way.
that, right? But it's a larger piece of this issue, which is that actually this is kind of like what got me out of academia in the first place, because I looked around and I saw all of these evidence-based treatments, and I was like, cool, but like, who's receiving these? Like, people aren't even receiving treatment, let alone evidence-based treatment in many cases. So I think it's just, I had a conversation I'll never forget with, a clinic lead at a major health system in in Boston, speaking of Boston, and he was talking to me about the idea of like moral injury, right? So like you're a doctor and you've got 5 minutes to spend with somebody and they tell you like, I have severe depression. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to put you on this 9-month wait list and just chill, right? Like this is an awful experience for a doctor who's going through dozens of patients every day who have issues they can't do anything about, and they know that the things that they're sending them to are not adequate, either because they're not evidence-based or because they're not even available or because they can't afford them. So this is an issue with all of healthcare, um, and a potential solution to that. So that's like no pressure, Andy, like no big deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really, healthcare is not going to catch up. Like it seems like digital may be the only way that we get there.
Yeah, I mean, these innovative products or innovations in general are so important, right? DTX is a component of it. Telehealth coaching, like,
Hmm.
we see with Eugene's company. Those things are all coming into play. Managing a whole disease state, like Welllinks is doing with COPD. Other companies are doing that and saying, pay us a capitated rate, and we'll manage this disease state from start to finish. Um, it's all changing, and it's all changing, I think, for the better. But again, you got to piece all these things together, and it's really complex to do that. I mean, even sitting down and thinking how you e-prescribe an app is really hard.
Yeah.
The
And
number of
where I spend a lot of my time is thinking about the other half of that, which is that once you get the app into a patient's hands, how do you actually get them to want to use it, right? How do you get it to become a part of their everyday life, especially because many of the things we need people to do are forever, right?
yeah,
Like it's not like, oh, do this for 6 weeks, and it's not a course of antibiotics. It's the digital equivalent of an antidepressant. And so, on one hand, we've got like, how do we even get this into the patient's hands? And then it's like, once it's in the patient's hands, how do we actually get them to ingest it?
yeah.
Yes, it's a large scope of things that need to happen.
And I mean, as humans, we want to fix things quickly. You know,
Yeah.
we want control over our our issues and things like that, right? And over our bodies. It's funny, like I'll go to the gym once and I'll be like, why didn't I lose weight? Because that's a full behavior change. I don't, I'm
I
just not.
changed my behavior. I did it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not the person that likes going to the gym every day. I wish I were. So that's why when people are given a pill, it's like, okay, great. This is a fix for me. Um, and people don't even take their medicine. So, when
No.
I hear that argument
Or
all the
even
time, like,
get their medicine from the pharmacy, right? So like
yeah,
there's a lot of chain of custody issues.
right. So when I hear the argument, well, I don't know if someone's going to use this product if they download it. It's like, well, you don't know if people are going to take their medicine if you prescribe it either, you know?
Yeah.
But I do understand people want to pay for things, or they want to prescribe things or offer things, and solutions that are used by the patient, right? And so to make something engaging is really on the manufacturer of the products.
Yep. And as far as I can tell, nobody knows how to do it yet. I mean, we're working on it, right? But like, I can't point to a solution and be like, they figured it out. It's very
Yeah,
much still in the making.
yeah. Well, what is the
Yeah.
percentage, if it worked, that would make you happy if it worked? Like 70% of people that use the product would use it, or 50% is.
Oh man, that's a lot of people. I mean, look, the baseline right now is like 10%, 5%. I think the best I've ever seen is something like 20%. So,
Yeah,
and actually, like if you look at how clinical research is done, the way that data is analyzed, right? We're just merging everybody together and thinking about the overall impact on the population. So, I think it's helpful to think about it like FDA pushes us on the manufacturer side to characterize what we've done to our entire research sample and show that on the whole, we've had a clinically significant impact on the sample. And I think that's a reasonable way to think about it. And like you might get there with only 40% activation if you have a very strong effect, right? So like you're having a profound effect on that 40%, and you're not having any effect. But when you average it all together, you're having a pretty good effect. It's not perfect, but I do think it's better than to kind of think about just percentage, because if you're trying to have an impact on an overall group of people, um, how big the effect is matters, right? If your effect is modest, you really need a lot of people to use it in order to impact the population as a whole. And a lot of these kind of cognitive behavioral therapy products, which, like, believe me, I got into industry to create cognitive behavioral therapy products because I was fed up with CBT not being available. The average effect of CBT in an app is not that large, right? Like,
Yeah.
Cohen's D 0.3, 0.4. So these are things like you'd really need 50% of the population, 40% of the population, like minimum, to be using. If you're completely and totally obliterating a disease, as long as the person uses an app, maybe it's smaller.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I have engagement conversations with, new companies all the time as they talk about whether or not they want to join and things like that. And, they're usually in pitch mode, and they'll say something like, "We have 100% engagement." And I'm all my response is always drop that down a little bit because 100 is not
Yeah,
believable.
listen, listen, like that's not what you think it means. Like, no.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, okay, so from there, like I think we've started to hit on this, right? Of like, in our wildest dreams, it seems like universal access, and combined with products that patients are willing to use one way or another, in at least at a level where we're seeing impact on the population. We're not aiming for 100%. That's not reasonable. Like, not every like same with people don't cash in their prescriptions either.
right.
We're just trying to have a dent. In your wildest dreams, what's something DTX would be able to do in the future that it can't do today? Like, we're reaching some patients now, right? We're getting, prescribed in places now. So like, this is just, let's do more and more and more of that until it's accessible. But like, what's a step change difference? Something that we are not doing today, that you would like to see?
Well, so I'd like to see a really streamlined ecosystem. Um, I think a good example of that would be in like mental health, right? We were talking about it could take 9 months to a year um, to get a patient on um, proper treatment for mental health issues like depression, anxiety, etc. I'd love to see digital therapeutics be that first line. I mean, by the time you go to your doctor and say, I think I have a mental health problem, you've probably had a mental health problem for quite a long time. Um, and so, with that saying, here's something for you. Now, it's going to take a while for us to find the right therapist. It's going to take a while for us to find the right medication. But I know that I can start delivering you therapy through this app immediately. That's going to help you with a baseline of depression, anxiety, PTSD, etc. And that's really all I ask. Is that so much?
Well, it's funny because I think, some of the component pieces are just lying around and like not being used in the right way. Like, I've been hearing about technologies that can listen to your voice or look at your text and very accurately tell you, how depressed you are, or very
Right.
accurately tell your GP how depressed you are, right? And so there are, back to your idea of, and this, kills me, right? So like, I have bipolar disorder, and like I didn't get the right medication for bipolar disorder for at least 10 years after I was diagnosed. And I was given like absolutely wrong, like made it worse I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? So like, it takes a really long time from the moment you start to suspect like something's up to the point where you're actually like going to be able to function as a human because you've been treated correctly. And there's technology out there that can shorten that gap if it's just like sort of integrated into, like, write a paragraph for me when you check in with your GP and have that text be analyzed, and then here's this digital product you can use while we figure out the rest. Like, that technology has existed for at least 6 years, I think longer than that. Like, I really feel like I've been hearing about it for a while. I don't know, like, if you've heard about these, kind of digital biomarker or like diagnosis tools. They're not FDA cleared, but like the technology's there and nobody's just taken it past the finish line. So like,
Right.
It's interesting because I don't think it's as huge of a gap as it sounds. It's more like logistical. It's like, can we
Right.
get these things integrated into one place?
Yeah. Can we put it all together and make the financials make sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because some of this stuff, some tools are not going to be a unicorn exit, you know? And I think there's an expectation sometimes of, I'm doing something new in healthcare. I need to exit for $2 billion, and we're all going to be rich from a
right.
company perspective. Um, we need tools that are integrated well, and the people that do the job should get paid for them, and the tool should be paid for. But it's healthcare, it's population health, it's for the good of humanity. um, how do we make this happen and make everybody happy without it having to be such um, a need to be that next blockbuster?
No, but I think it's true in DTX too. Like, I mean, we've got to think about the fact that we have all these point solutions, and that's not what's going to get us past the finish line in the end. A
Yeah,
bunch of individual, people trying to be unicorns. Some things are going to get acquired. Things are already getting acquired. More things are going to get acquired, and that's what it needs to happen, right? Like, I think that's the natural progression, is that things are going to be coming together in a few places so that all these things can happen together. As long as it's 20 individual companies all trying to make a 100 million plus exit,
yeah,
all trying to compete, it's just they can't all have $100 million. Like, yeah, I agree. That's a tricky one. Band together doesn't mean a bunch of point solutions all getting paid their ideal price.
right,
Some things
right.
become part of other things.
Yeah, hate to be a downer like that, but you know,
No, I mean, I don't know. I think it's I don't know. It has a kind of a exciting vibe. Like, I realize it's for some it will be challenging, but it's also a sign that we have matured as a field past the
Mhm.
point of, like, let's all just try and do this alone. Like, that
Yeah,
was fun for a while. And we
right,
made certain impacts, but at the same time, like, now we've got to think about, like, what's our end game. Like, what does it really mean to be a ride or die in digital therapeutics? Because,
yeah,
like you said, if there's no risk, we're not going to change anything.
yeah. I mean, I see it as filling those gaps in the patient journey in general, right? So it's like a mix of care management, accessibility to humans, and having the right tools in your pocket. And I don't really know who's going to be the winner there and put that together,
Yeah.
but we know it's going to
Well,
happen.
and figuring out the right time, right? Because it's like, how do you know it's the right time in the patient journey to insert this thing?
Yeah,
Means you need smarter assessments and diagnostics. And I don't see people working that hard in the assessment and diagnostics. Like, there are a couple of obvious outliers, but you don't see this. Lots of people trying to treat things. Very few people trying to be like, how are we going to figure out a person even needs this digital treatment, because their GP sure as hell isn't going to figure it out. Um,
yeah. And you're
yeah.
seeing things that can start to identify people very far upstream. But the problem is, as patients, we don't necessarily want to be identified very far upstream. You know,
Mm,
it's tough.
that
You're
could
like, well, this
be,
isn't really
right?
a problem for me. I don't want to worry about it yet. You know, if
They're
you
like,
were
how
able
did you
to,
even know? That's creepy. Like,
yeah, like if you were able to take a drop of blood, let's say like Theranos worked, right, for a second. No, I'm kidding. Take a drop of blood and tell me, when I'm 80, here's everything you're going to have. I wouldn't want to know, you know? So it's like really striking that balance. But,
well, and talking to patients and actually figuring out what it is that they do want, because there is a world where patients want what we're describing. It's just the execution matters so much.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And with that, we have somehow talked our way through our entire 20 minutes, and
I know. I
we're done.
go for
So I
another.
know, that's how it feels, for sure. Thank you for coming, Andy. It was great to talk to you, and all of you out there. Thank you for listening to DTX Equals. Catch you next time.